Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Beard and welcome to The Level, a vodcast series brought to you by VMLY&R. This vodcast creates a space where we highlight our POC colleagues and underrepresented groups within the agency. The intention is for us to talk about the real topics, real issues, and real action steps that we can take to improve the workplace and the work that we do. We want to amplify and level up our colleagues, our communities, and give actionable steps toward allyship. Thank you so much for having me today.
Woo-hoo. I'm so glad you're here.
I know. We're so excited to have you. I was like, you guys, how long have we been doing this work from home thing? And I swear at least once a week. You're on mute. You're talking on mute. I'm like, of course, welcoming our guest. I would be welcoming her on. Anyway, but Jamie, we're so excited to have you. Welcome to The Level.
Thank you.
So talked about kind of, in our previous episodes, we're really excited about welcoming guests onto the episodes. Jamie is one of the co-chairs of Spirit. I think one of the only ERGs dedicated to the Native American Indigenous people community within, I don't even know, advertising, North America, like
WPP
definitely.
for sure.
For sure. And I just have to say that the last event that you guys kind of closed out the month with Notorious Cree was freaking epic. Like, just even starting off with his story was so great, but then just watching his kind of ceremonial and traditional dance was just phenomenal. And so it was amazing just to all throughout, and even to you sharing your story, in one of our previous events. It was really, really great. So just really glad to have you here joining us. So I'm sure you've seen a few episodes, and we usually like to start off with a gratitude moment and really just center ourselves and start off with somewhere positive. So this episode, we're going to be kind of talking about BIPOC wins, some of those that may be on the phone, on the screen today, you being one. So I'd just love to hear about, your time at VMLY&R and your successes and how things have been going for you.
Sure. Gosh, I feel like I've been at VMLY&R forever. I started at the agency in 2015 and have been I worked client side for a very short period of time and then moved to the communications team where I have been so well taken care of. I have absolutely loved every second of working with the agency, but I'm currently a senior communications manager. I sit in Denver. I used to sit in Kansas City, but I have loved every second with the agency. And we had an opportunity a few years ago to start Spirit, our Native and Indigenous employee resource group. And what's kind of strange, it's the very first time in my life that I'd ever been in a community of people like me. My mom is Cherokee Nation and my dad's Choctaw Nation, among a few other mixes of things. But I had never really gotten the opportunity to be in a community like that. So VMLY&R is super unique. And like I said, we are WPP's only Native and Indigenous employee resource group. So it's just been such a pleasure and my favorite part of my job to be able to do that. And the recent success, I guess, I got promoted a year ago to senior communications manager, and I've gotten raises since. So well taken care of is my takeaway.
And how about the piece that you just got published? Let's talk about that.
I know I'm not the only person that was super curious about the data that was being released in June of 2020. WPP released their data. A ton of other agencies released theirs too on employee their race or ethnic identity. But I think I was maybe looking at it just a little bit differently than other folks. My eye, what you see, my eye automatically went right and was like looking, are there any Native and Indigenous people like at this agency or in this holding company? And I think that we've had a really cool opportunity to create a community within VMLY&R. But that got me to thinking, what if people don't have a community like ours? What do they do when they need to tap that community or run an idea by that community. So I gave just a really quick, I gave a few ideas for agencies and other folks to consider on how to start. But we are a community that's not often thought of. We kind of hide.
Right. No,
we
loved it.
Purposely, historically.
We know. Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for writing that piece. I think it was so important, and we just reading it was just so profound, and I think really important for you to share your voice. And so glad that it was published, and just a huge celebration for that. And we'll link it. We'll link it in the vodcast.
Yes.
Right.
Check it out, like YouTube.
I know, right? Check the link below. Subscribe.
Wow. But that's
I love it.
Success, because apparently everyone else here, Nikeisha, Dani, also have some big promotions that they should be celebrating. I'm gonna put you guys on the spot now.
I know, Clara, you're just like, I don't mind the cheerleader in you, so I'm very much appreciated. Yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to, nod to this episode around, just sort of BIPOC wins, because I think, like we said very recently, we've all been, really recognized, I think, for the hard work that we've put in, for the impact that we're making, not only in our day-to-day jobs and the client work, and support of our, agency colleagues that we're doing, but, really also the above and beyond, like Dani's taking over, as co-chair for DEI and Creative. Jamie is co-chair for Spirit. Like I'm taking over for co-chair for Fluorescent. And so it's just, we're also doing a lot more to just, I think, really contribute to the culture of VMLY&R and to the culture of our communities, and, enriching kind of the employee experience, and just really appreciative that is being appreciated and recognized, and and that action is following words. So excited. Yes, a little gratitude.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think I was very fortunate. I worked at Redfuse before, so with merger comes much responsibility. So I think that VMLY&R is really starting to understand that it takes a lot. So after the merger, I was very I moved over to the health group, and upon moving to health group in May, I was promoted to the senior art director. And that was really, I was really fortunate. And I think what I've learned, I was so excited. And I think I was really scared too, right? And just as we're talking about wins, I think something that is scary sometimes is when you don't win, right? So a part of winning is putting yourself out there and being afraid to fail. So, and to put yourself out there, make ourselves uncomfortable and say, hey, no, listen, we put it in the work, and I think that's something that we're starting to learn collectively as a group, as just people of color, is inherently is not in my first nature to take up space and be like, this is what I deserve. This is so the shift now to actually be recognized. I'm like, oh my God, really? I did it because I knew no one else was going to do it. I did it because it was right in my heart. I did it because this is what I believe in. And, as people of color, we've always had to live this duality of life, of my day job and then the real work that I'm doing. And so now that the two are becoming fused and people are recognizing the good shit we putting out, it's incredible and it's awesome. We got give it a little spicy here, a little spicy. But I think that's a really cool part. So I really, that has been the cool thing for people to really start understanding the impact and the importance of what we do outside of our day jobs.
Yes. And I think we would definitely be remiss if we didn't shout out one of the, OG co-hosts, Luis, who also got a promotion in the last couple of months as well, too. Very, very well deserved. He's spending some quality time with his family, and we love him. We miss him. Luis, can't wait to see you back, hopefully before the new year. But Just also wanting to make sure, your wins are recognized as well too, my friend. I think what it would be interesting for us to even talk about too, and maybe Clara, you can, sort of jump in on this piece. I know we've talked a lot about, some of the things around kind of imposter syndrome. Even Dan, you're kind of talking about like, it's not for us to take up space, like we're usually there kind of like, are we allowed? Are we not? So just like the flip side of what's been happening. I know we've talked about a lot of great success, but, we're also somewhat in the midst of a great resignation kind of around us. And, what the loss of BIPOC talent, I think, is even more severe now, sort of like we're supposed to be retaining and growing and hiring. And, you have, companies, agencies, sort of now losing that talent. So like, I don't know, I just love to like hear your thoughts on kind of like this, whole kind of great resignation and sort of the impact on BIPOC talent, or what, organizations should be thinking about to help retain them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a nuanced, loaded question, which is, I mean, we can get right into it. I think there's a lot of things, right? The media talks about the great resignation. There are a lot of people leaving, but I think also from a stats perspective, putting on my BAV hat, we have to think about who didn't leave in 2020 and where the world kind of went to a stop. And also, I think this move of, accelerating change that was already happening. So in my view, I think, in some ways in the past year, it came a little bit short, right? So people who were ready to leave or already felt like they didn't belong in the organization, we have to be realistic with ourselves that 1 year of conscious learning and thinking and having aware in our minds are not going to undo the last 30, 40, 50, 70 years of systemic oppression in corporate companies that were not designed for women, for BIPOC, for, anyone that's in an underrepresented community. So I think that's a really clear part as we think about great resignation, is that it's not COVID. COVID just accelerated the existing things that were broken and stressed and made that break even faster, right? Like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't COVID. I think COVID is an accelerator. And I think to that end, we need to reframe our thinking and think about, okay, there are success stories of people moving up because we're finally open and being honest and finding our voice. I think we talked about that a lot before, about what does it mean to gain that confidence and passion and be okay knowing not everyone's going to like you because there's more coming for you. And I think a lot of folks in the BIPOC community are starting to realize that, myself included, that maybe I might not please everyone, but that doesn't mean my opportunities are going to close because I have to keep going forward. No one else is going to define that path for me. Only I know what I can achieve. And if I want to be CEO, I will be. But that's for me to define and assess, not for other people. So, again, I think it's less about the great resignation and much more on the reprioritization of yourself and where you want to go. So,
yes, Clara, yes.
I'm like, whew.
Reprioritization of where you want to go. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody hear that?
You. And only you know.
And right. That, you bring up a really good one. Like that is, I think, one of the hard things I've been kind of like processing over the last few months. With the promotion came, sort of new opportunities in terms of the type of projects that I'm working on. And it's really made me like take a look at like, what do I want? Where do I want my career to go next? Like I've had a great, amount of experience, client side, agency side, different categories, different disciplines. I've done everything from strategy to client engagement to new business. And, really, I think one of the things, that has helped in some of my like reprioritization thinking is advocates and sponsors. Yeah. And I think because, unfortunately, I, in my career, have been very sheltered from upper levels of leadership, or what does it look like to be a CEO? What does it look like to be a CMO, a SVP? And right. So you almost don't even know how to reprioritize to that or how to envision that. And I think one of the big things that is really just like I mean, I really do thank God every day for coming to VMLY&R, for just the, not only colleagues that I've been introduced who have become friends and just added so much value to my life, but also, the proactive sponsors and leaders who have really, seen potential, seen growth, seen, what I bring beyond, like you said, Dani, just doing well in my day-to-day job, but all of the other sort of soft skills that we sometimes don't, value as high as those technical ones. But, like, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out, like, my agency leadership that really, was so proactive in seeing me and saying, what about this? What do you think, about walking a path here? And it was all of a sudden like, oh wait, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I never thought of that, And so now I'm able to shift my thinking a little bit, reprioritize the kind of relationships I have, the kind of projects I engage in, even the existing relationships I'm in, like, how do I show up a little bit differently? So, I think to your point about like that reprioritization, one aspect for me that's really helped in that is, advocates, sponsors. And so, if there is a takeaway tip, and I'm sure we'll re-bring this up on the offline, but like, leaders, where are you advocating and looking and seeing, your BIPOC leaders and bringing them forth and really helping to, cultivate that next generation of leaders.
Nikeisha, you brought up such a good point. That's how I'm like, girl, me, I'm like, it's like double dutch. I'm like, I'm ready. You said something so great. I love talking to you guys. But when you talk about sponsorship and mentorship, right? So to your point, I would really like this opportunity to call out some of my mentors, but some people that we've all worked with, I have had this experience, right? And it's something that I've learned from my mentors. So, I learned heavily from Destiny. What she did, and, I don't mean to like divulge the conversation, but I had met her at a summer party, long story short. And I was like, girl, you're great. I'm like, I love what you're doing for the Tuesday morning meetings. I'm like, you're awesome. And true story. We did a little salsa number and everything. And, we followed up that week and we got to conversations, and she started, giving me like, hey, I have this thing, you want to work on it? Or, I have this idea. And whatever little power she had, she created space for me to not just tell people that I'm great, but to show my greatness. So that is something she has continuously always done. And it's been like, 3-4 years now, and she's one of the people, that's always, she doesn't just say, oh yeah, Dani's great. Dani's great. She will say, here's an opportunity. See for yourself. She's incredible. And that has made the difference in my career, my confidence, and everything. So like that specific kind of mentorship, that, creating opportunities in that space, it is what made all the difference for me.
And I'll say, Dani, too, you have to give yourself credit. I think when we think about mentorship and sponsorship, we talk a lot about the mentor and the sponsor and the advocate, but a lot of it is also driven, which I don't think people talk about as much. And, for everyone listening, it's sometimes you just don't ask for permission, but you have to be open to that mentorship program. And maybe a mentor is different. It's not as structured as you think. And it's just someone who's going to give you advice. It's going to open up things that are a little bit different, but you also have to kind of lean in and be that, the counterpart to drive that, Dani, you showed up and you're like, okay, this is the opportunity. I'm going to take it. Because I think that's also the delicate balance, right? It's like leaders, all of us have to create environments where people feel like they can flourish. There's safety, there's movement forward, but it can't only be on a leadership standpoint. It also needs to be all of us feeling comfortable to voice what we want. And I think that was an unlock for me in this past year is maybe, as a woman, as a BIPOC, person, sometimes you hold back a lot because you don't know if it's safe for you to speak up or to talk about these things or draw too much attention. And I think for a long time, we've been fed that myth that if you put your head down, you're good. You know, a lot of that comes from marginalized communities and underrepresented groups because you're trying to make space for other people. And I think it goes back again. It's like we have to lean in as much as other leaders need to also, you know, reach out. It's like we also have to take that and keep it going and not just, you know, take the 10 minutes and be like, you know what, I don't want to reach back out to her again.
Yeah.
She's busy. I'm nervous. You know, I've gone through that myself where I'll be like, I had 30 minutes with an executive and I'm like, I don't want to bother her or him for another, you know, a year. But then, you know, I have to remind myself, no, it's not. But it's like conditioned, right? So
yes.
You know, I think it's about us reminding ourselves, like, we need to also just keep it going and not feel afraid or nervous, you know?
Yeah. It makes me think a little bit like maybe like Dani, you had said something. This was our first episode too, you know, kind of a little bit in that imposter syndrome where you're like, oh, and all these thoughts come in and then you have to check yourself and be like, when have I, like, I've succeeded, I've done, you know, I almost think about the opposite too in this case where it's like, I've spent over 15 years in my career being quiet and not asking. And look where it got me. Definitely very seasoned, very experienced, you know, I have successes under my belt, but like, you know, it took me almost, you know, 15, 16, almost 17 years into my career to get a senior level title that I finally deserve because I started opening my mouth. I started thinking about like, where do I want to go? What impact do I want to make? So it's like, I love what you're saying, Clara. And like, you know, again, pulling that kind of nod from you, Dani, like, let me have this conversation with myself and ask myself again, like we said, closed mouths don't get fed, boo. Closed mouths do not get fed.
That's
right. Listen, so
Jamie, do you have
yeah,
any-
I know thoughts. I was gonna ask Jamie.
Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm just sitting back like enjoying. I forgot that I'm like part of this.
Center.
I think I'm watching a panel. This is great.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I think I love what you just said. I've never heard it put that way. I think there's definitely a balance, like, you know, in the corporate world between, you know, putting your head down, getting your work done and raising your hand and saying, hey, you know, I have something to say and I need to share this right away. You know, I worked in a billion jobs before I got into my career in advertising that the less that my manager heard from me, the better. And I think that mentality is very hard to get out of. Yeah. But, you know, I think that I think now is just a really exciting time to be part of a corporate culture because people are saying, you know, bring your full self to work. You know, we want that. That's not something that we're going to like squish anymore. And I know imposter syndrome, I have so many thoughts around it, even as like a BIPOC person, because you know, I'll say it now, I have very light colored skin. So I pass so easily and no one knows until I say it, like, hey, I'm Native. You know, Thanksgiving does bug me a little bit. Anyway, but, you know, I think there's a lot of ways that you can address that in your own life where you're feeling imposter syndrome. And I think it all does come back to what Dani said earlier, is just get out of your comfort zone and, you know, make a point to do that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I read this quote about imposter syndrome. It's like, so if, you know, it was like maybe it was like a cartoon. So it's like your boss gives you a promotion and you're like, okay, I'm in trouble. I'm done. I'm getting fired. And then you listen to that and then they're like, no, just kidding. You got a promotion. And then you choose not to believe it. So the imposter is so strong. But the question is like, why is like, I'm butchering this whole thing now, but it's basically like saying like, why do you believe the imposter syndrome at the same degree as which you don't believe your manager, right? The person who's promoting you. So like, then why are you holding your imposter syndrome up to be on a pedestal? You should also be not believing your imposter voice because, right? Like when you go in for a promotion and you truly don't believe it, you're not believing that you deserve it with such animosity. But then it's like, why don't you actually view your imposter with that same degree of skepticism? So like, it's kind of interesting how much imposter syndrome doesn't make sense, because you know, if you're not believing what everyone else is saying, you shouldn't believe what the imposter is saying too. Now I'm looping it back, but that was like a really
fully
angle.
That's really
right?
interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
You're so smart, Clara.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you are. The best advice I've ever gotten is let other people tell you no.
Yeah.
Rather than letting yourself tell you no.
And also, imposters are also really good fakes, so it's pretty close to the real thing, right? Like, that's the other thing. I'm like, you know, it's good enough.
Hey, listen, I definitely believed in the whole mantra of fake it till you make it, because I was just like, you know, you get in these jobs sometimes, you're like, okay, we're going to see what happens here. But like, I think where we have to make sure we don't get caught up is when we realize we're not faking it anymore. That when we really realize, like, we're the real deal. Like, we are entitled to, you know, we're deserving of the titles we have, you know, the paychecks we bring in, the blessings in our lives. Like, I think it's, you know, for me, it's been like remembering I'm not faking it anymore. Like, I'm a G. Like, yeah.
You know, that's so funny, Nikeisha. So I have this theory. So like, kind of similar to what you said, Clara. I have like, this is how my brain works, right? So think about a timeline, right? You have zeros at the center. You have +2. You have -2, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have -2 represents the amount of space we have to kind of have our negative thoughts and be hard on ourselves. I have all that space. You have that much amount of energy to be that kind. So whenever I'm really hard on myself, I'm like, bitch, why are you in the negatives right now? You have the energy to be in the positives, and you choose to be in the negatives. But it's literally all about how and where we place our energy. And like, that's how I'm trying to shift it in my brain. I'm like, all right, you had a -2, and you really could be as a +2 right now. You just playing yourself. So I'll
you
share
never
that
want to play yourself.
Because you're never gonna win.
brain.
I love that. I mean, I think that goes back to maybe one of our first episodes of how like energy is your currency of life.
See, why Claire be dropping all the like the gems out here, all the hashtags? Like, okay.
I just hashtag. No, but it is, right? Like, where you choose.
Energy is your currency.
Where you choose to spend your energy and what you buy in exchange for the energy, right? So if you're going to put all your energy in a negative, why would you put money? Like, you will never bet on a losing horse in a race, right? Why do that? And I think that's something that's important for us to think about. Like, your energy and your time is your currency. It's not about money, right? Like, it's really the energy and the thoughts you put, because then otherwise, like, what's the point of everything else?
Right. I love that. Well, ladies, should we take each other offline and maybe leave with some parting concrete words of advice and wisdom? I think everyone's sort of wrapping up their year and thinking about 2022. We're all going to get into, what's that thing we set in January? Resolutions. Oh yeah. Like, you can see how often I set those. So, we're going to, but, I do more of a like take stock and, reflect on the year, but goal setting, all of that. And I think, be really great for us to, sort of impart some thoughts, not just on, sort of our communities and how they may be going into the new year, but also, kind of the other people managers and leaders and what thoughts and advice as they start to think about, coming back to the new year and leading their teams, really supporting, concepts like sponsorship and bringing your whole self to work and, uplifting BIPOC leaders. So love to hear the offline. Who's on first?
Well, I like to actually set a word of the year rather than resolutions, and then I kind of let that word take me where it will. And actually, what's funny, my word of the year in 2021 was energy. So I love that we were talking about it. I haven't decided what 2022 is going to be yet, but 2020 was learn. So I like spent my pandemic time like making a list of all the stuff I wanted to learn. And I took up like pottery and French, and I have like piano lessons still on the list that I want to do. But anyway, a lot can be said there. But I think for, this is a really unique time in history. The pandemic changed so much, and it's still ongoing. It's still ongoing, and I think it's good that you can take the time to reevaluate where you want your life to be. We had an entire year or more literally snatched away from us, and I think there are so many ways that it will change you as a person, change society. I'm not quite sure what this world will look like when we're technically out of the pandemic yet. I still think we're still doing it, but I think, take the time to evaluate where you want your life to be. I mean, my family, for example, we up and moved into Denver 6 months ago. My husband got a new job, and I said, hey, VMLY&R, I'd love to stay with you. Can we do it? And they did. And, we wanted that opportunity to be outside more and fill our life with things that Colorado has to offer. So I think it's a good thing that we get to do this. And the pandemic disproportionately affected BIPOC people as well. So if you have a choice to reevaluate your life, that's amazing. But I think we do also need to remember that many people didn't get a choice to reevaluate. It was a decision made for them by the pandemic and by, employers who maybe don't have, living wages right now. So I think when you think about the Great Resignation, think about the fact that many people had that choice made for them. Like, the millions of women who are having to stay home and care for their children because we don't have adequate childcare, just for one example. But think about your word for the year if you like that. I'm thinking about mine, and we'll see where it takes me, but it's been fun so far.
I love that. Mine was intention for the year. I kind of did that. That was the first time I did it, was for this year, and that was because I really wanted to live an intentional year. And so, yeah, I'm doing the same thing, kind of thinking about what my word is going to be for next year. So I think, for me, like I said, I don't think I can stress enough, we've talked about this on pretty much every episode, my passion around, people management and just, how important it is to see your people, to know your people, whether they directly report to you or not. I think just the, shadow of influence that, leaders have, whether it be business leads, team leads, project leads, we just understanding and having empathy and, coming from a place of inclusivity and prioritizing sort of belonging and communication. I think that's just going to be so critically important. As we continue, like you said, Jamie, figuring out as we come out of this, what does the world look like? As we, start to have more moments in the office together. I know, like I spent 4 days in the office last week, which was insane. But, it was a different dynamic, and just how, that will start to change more and more as more people are in the office. And so I think, I impress upon, people managers and, team leads, any kind of leadership, just, lean into your people more, really try to prioritize, just where they are and knowing them and how, they can best or bring their best selves to work and really show up and, for not just themselves, but for us all. So that'd be my offline takeaway, like prioritize your people.
I think along those lines of the people managers, I think the main thing for me this year, or just in reflection, is kind of like forgiveness and patience. I think it's been really hard for everybody, for all people, BIPOC, women, men, family, caretakers, that, as we want and commit ourselves to so much change, we have to also be realistic of what are things that are systemic that maybe leaders don't have as good control, or people themselves don't. And I think all of that, right? It's not to say, oh, like it's on one responsibility, it's on all of us. And one thing, and I'm notoriously impatient. I always like to get shit done and keep it forward. But, yeah, I'm a pusher. My team knows that. But also realizing that, there's like change will happen as long as we continue to believe in it. And sometimes change can be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward. Then all of a sudden you leapfrog, 10 steps. And that part's been really important, that, I think from an offline perspective, like managers, like don't feel like you're not doing enough, but also you can do more at the same time. And it just goes down to like have the open conversations, be honest with what you can or can't do with your team. And don't, I think just being really vulnerable and not having to seem like you're the most powerful one is really important, because then it helps all of us kind of move forward if we all have more honest conversations with each other. So that's a big part, it's like sometimes things are the system and other times it's people related. So knowing the distinction on a team, I think would be really helpful.
I bet you're a real great boss, Clara.
Right. I feel like we're gonna have a segment where we bring all of Clara's people.
I know.
On.
I'm like, I need some leadership lessons.
I don't know.
I do. Dani, take us out, girl.
All right. So mine is it's something I took a step back. We're on topic of mentors. Something I've done, I've shifted again to try, and reach out, find mentors who align with me, right? Because you can have mentors for different aspects of your life. But there's something, so I have 2 like creative mentors. One's Joao Jackal, the other one's Jin Park. So one thing I really appreciate about Jin, and this is why I'm kind of bringing this up, is I can bring my worst idea to him and he doesn't judge me for it. It sounds crazy. He's like, all right, so what's he doesn't think I'm he doesn't think I'm stupid. He doesn't think I'm not creative. He doesn't think anything less of me. He'd be like, all right, let's poke holes through this to see, maybe there is some nuggets in there. Maybe there is something else in there. You should push it. Or I've seen that done before. But never have I ever brought him an idea that he's like, you're let's go crazy. He leaves that opportunity and space open for me to be whatever I want. Well, to be the idea, to be whatever. So our really bad ideas, we turn it and we flip it into something that's award winning. And I feel comfortable and safe with him to do that. And, it was just one of those characteristics. I took a step back and I'm like, okay, what are some of the things I'm learning? And that is something about, a quality in a manager that is not, that is not necessarily always theirs. So that's just the one offline. Be somebody that people could bring their shit ideas to. That's it. That's it.
Love that.
Like that offline.
Be the person I can bring my shit idea to. If that's not a way to close out, I don't know what is. Dani, you're always my favorite. And I just have to say, we're going to end this episode before it happens. Dani made it through an entire episode and did not cry, people.
Oh.
Got goosebumps, but she didn't cry. I know. I thought there was one moment we were going to get you, but I know. I was like, we made it. I think every time you cried, I cried too. So, but I think it just shows like how, I think real and vulnerable and just, raw, we really try to be, on this show and just really try to, bring everything that, we are and we can to this. So hopefully we have one more episode under our belts. We'll see. Stay tuned. But, as always, we love and appreciate you guys checking us out. And always hit us up. If there's things you want us to talk about, you want to be a guest on an episode, love to have you. So anything else, ladies? I think quick, little bye-bye to Louise. We miss you. We'll see you soon. And thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us. Just really appreciate you sharing some time in your story with us. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Bye, all.
Bye.